From the slums I come, oh marine beast boy. I know love is war, I know God is God. That will never stop till the war is won. Till the kids unborn and the ones we lost. I'll never forget. I'll never forget, gang. I'll never forget you. I'll never forget, gang. I'll never forget you. I'll never forget. I'll never forget. Oh, boy, no leo. Boy, no leo. Boy, no leo. Boy, no leo. Bashini meri ngongo. Bashini meri kwai kwai. If you're hearing my voice, I want you to know. I will know. I will know. I will know. I will not forget you. I will know. I will know. I will know. I've been vigilant. I've been intelligent. Nobody get it wrong for this military. Everybody will it die like an ant and run like a... If you're hearing my voice, I want you to know. I will know. I will know. I will know. I will not forget you. I will know. I will know.
Good morning, people. You are tapped in right now into the Frontline live stream. You are tuned into Frontline FM. Yeah, man. So right now, you're tapped into the Frontline live stream. And yeah, man, I've just come back from Lagos, Nigeria, so I've got a few stories to tell. A lot has been going on right now, though. Well, I was out there in Nigeria, working with a Rise TV, covering the Globe Awards. And then after that, just linking up with a whole bunch of artists. As you know, I shoot music videos out here in the UK, but also I work with a lot of Nigerian talents. I'm of Nigerian descent myself. I'm a Robo on my father's side, and on my mother's side, I'm West Indian. So I've still got that. And even in the West Indian, if you know about the Caribbean, a lot of people, they come from West Africa, in particular Nigeria, Ghana. So yeah, man, you have to represent, man. So a lot of the people I work with out here, basically, I went to go link them. We shot some interviews, some podcasts, also chopped it up and discuss some ideas. So there's a lot of big things that we have planned that we're going to shoot over those sides, but also plan to bring a lot of talent from Nigeria over to the UK and see what we can get working on. But yeah, man, other than that, man, there was a lot going on in the UK. I know it's been blitz apparently, and then there was a whole scandal. I mean, there's been a whole cost of living crisis for a while. But apparently Barclays had a whole financial issue, and where loads of people thought they were giving out free money, but they weren't. So what ended up happening is loads of people started withdrawing as much money as they could. But then afterwards, after Barclays resolved the issue, it started billing people for all the money they withdrew that was over their limit. Central C's dropped his album, and that's done very well. But then it's an interesting one because you got those from the UK that say, while he's big, he don't fully represent what's going on over here. Some people are calling them man haters. Some people are saying, nah, that man have something valid to say. He's got even though he's quote unquote not an industry artist in the traditional way, we know that a lot of artists are getting support from the industry as everything's shifted now in it. So those that we might think are independent really get a lot of support from the industry, and those that you might think are in the industry actually are doing a lot of stuff themselves. So yeah, a lot of things are shifted, in particular after the pandemic. So the way the industry interacts with artists and those that we call industry plants has completely shifted. So yeah, some people are saying the stuff he's doing over in the States is good, but it's not representative of what's going on over here. And also, we know that he changed. You understand? He's not really rapping about what's it called again. He even though he was around that lifestyle, he wasn't fully. You understand? The way he's rapping as if he fully was about that life, and some people say he's not. But some people say nah, he really was involved. What's it called again? Just his haters, isn't it? It's haters. So there's been positive and negative, but either way, the result, regardless of whether he's got support or not from the industry, and regardless of whether people feel he's got the results, isn't it? It's done. The album's doing extremely well. I say a lot of it's the fact that he's a marketing genius, and he's been one of those few artists that recognize a lot of connections UK artists don't take advantage of, like the fact that the UK is in Europe, so he decided to collaborate and work with a lot of European artists, whereas a lot of UK artists are very insular. They want to do everything in the UK because they feel like everything's happening in the UK, in particular London, but at the same time they want to be international, want to be in the States without leaving the UK. So my man, not only did he go Europe, but he also went to a lot of, even though he's not Nigerian, I believe he's half Guyanese, half I think white, I'm not too sure, maybe Jewish or something, but I know his Guyanese side is like Chinese Guyanese as well. So obviously the Caribbean is actually very multicultural, it's very mixed, but majority of, in particular, a lot of the more popular Caribbean countries are majority black in it, Afro-Caribbean, like we talk Jamaica, Trinidad, what's it called again, Haiti, even Guyana. These have significant black populations, but people do forget that, there's Chinese, there's Indians, there's various different people of white descent, you understand, there's Latino, Spanish, you understand, all within the Caribbean, different ethnic groups, you understand, while the majority might be black because of slavery, and because also a lot of the indigenous peoples mix with black people, like if you know about Maroons and stuff like that. But yeah, there still was other ethnic groups. So he I feel like because he was in that racial ambiguity, he could have easily done the how would I say, trying to take advantage of the privileges that come with that. But he took advantage of different privileges, you understand, that we all have access to. Like, he went to Nigeria, even though he's not Nigerian, you understand? And he did some work over there. He went to Brazil, you understand? And really and truly, I say this is because this is something black artists, especially from the UK, should be doing. Like, everyone is from because the UK colonized the whole planet, pretty much, you understand? Obviously, I'm talking in extreme generalizations, but yeah, a lot of our socioeconomic structure, political structure comes from the UK because the UK colonized, you understand, and took advantage of a lot of places. But with that being said, the result of that is also all the people it colonized, including black people, are in the UK, which means there are black people from all over the world in the UK. You understand? All different nationalities, you understand? But one root, African root, you understand? But we don't see that, obviously, because of colonialism, whatever. But my point is that my man's going to all the different black countries, you understand? Something easily people from the UK could do, especially on a UK passport, you understand? And he's going to the States, and he's putting the work there, and he's putting the work in Europe, you understand? So, and he went ham with the marketing in terms of understanding the way Gen Z consumes media. So either way, my man got the results, you understand, through putting in the work, regardless of, like I said, those are two opinions. You got those that think, you understand, it's not representative of what's going on over here, and you got those that say, you understand, he's done his thing, you understand, and he's put in the work. But either way, the results are there. So that's another big thing that's happened while I've been gone. But yeah, man, right now I'm just gonna hop into a couple reactions, man, just trying to get back into the flow of streaming. Obviously, as I was out there in Nigeria, I want to cover a few Nigerian things. If you know about Fela Kuti, so the originator of Afro beats, also just for his ideology and the way he used to think and talk on issues and the type of songs he used to make, he's almost like the equivalent of a Bob Marley. And a lot of people, where they misunderstand things like Rastafari and they misunderstand things like reggae, they think it's all just about smoking loud and, you know, dancing and good vibes and that's part of it, but part of the political movement about behind things like reggae and Rastafari was liberation from slavery. You understand? Empowerment of black people, and particularly in the context of during the 70s and what had happened before the 70s and the build up towards that, colonialism, slavery, oppression of the working class and black peoples all around the world, you understand? So Fela Kuti for Nigeria was doing something similar. So same thing is that when we think about Afro beats, yeah, we got the vibes, the music, but we forget that the original Afro beats also had a strong meaning and message behind it. So his son, similar way to Bob Marley's children, are very active politically and talking about certain issues as well as making music. So is one of his sons, Seun Kuti. He does various live streams. He talks a lot about Nigerian politics and honestly just talks about things from a very real perspective. He's honest from his opinion. And you may not agree with everything he says. You may not get everything right, but he's genuine. He's not just reciting facts. You understand, and things. He's talking a lot from his perspective and his own experience of living in Nigeria, and also his own plethora of knowledge he's gathered, you understand, from living, reading and all that stuff. So yeah, man, we're going to dive into his video without further ado, and hopefully if I have some time I can start, checking in some of the stuff that's been going on in the UK and around the world, man. But yeah, man, I'm just going to keep this one lighthearted because I've just got back in the country and yeah, want to just kind of smoothly get back into the flow of things. But without further ado, man, let's get into it, man.
Hello, everybody. All I do.
Bear with me, I'm having a little, let me see if test it.
My goodness.
My bad, people, having a little technical issue. Let me just quickly resolve this. Bear with me 1 second. Yeah, my bad, peoples. Yeah, so that should all be hopefully resolved now. So yeah, without further ado, let's hop straight back into the video then.
Now of this. Hello, everybody. All I do. What's popping? What's good in this world? my people. Oh my goodness. Now of this thing, the documentary is even work. The title was exciting, but Lord Jesus, 2 hours on this shit, no way. Good Lord Jesus, Black Jesus. I do my new inquest. See the here. Put some a day to the gods there. Everything. Don't complete this arm. You know. What's happening? Yeah. So today's live, real quick. Western civilization and its hidden meaning. You know, one of the things we Amos Wilson teach us, we say, you know, one of the things he teach us about as ourselves as African people and education, because he was also an educationist. You know, speaking on our education, say if you know learn your education through African culture, if you know Africanized education, if you teach African people Western education, right, you are teaching them how to be comfortable in subjugation. Say any African person will get only European education and now waiting the leading way be that. Meaning say in also the advanced Western civilization. You see that person will be okay with being subservient, with slavery, with subjugation. Ultimately,
So to explain the context here of what he's saying, for those that don't understand, Nigeria, well, I wouldn't even say Nigeria, isn't it? But the kingdoms that inhabited, the kingdoms, the empires, the caliphates that now make up Nigeria today, participated a lot during the transatlantic slave trade. Now, what you need to understand is during this period, there was really two types of slavery that had been occurring in Africa, broadly speaking, prior to the arrival. Well, I would say prior to the arrival of the Europeans, but really not really, because the Europeans had already been involved in this trade for a while, as you'll come to realize. So people say the Arab slave trade, but this is kind of an inaccurate description, right? And I'm going to focus on this context on West Africa, because when we talk about quote unquote the Arab slave trade, it's really two slave trades, right? It's the trans-Saharan slave trade, and really that's just the trans-Saharan trade, you understand? Because it wasn't exclusive to trading slaves, as I'll talk about in a bit. And then you have the Indian Ocean slave trade, you understand? Which at certain points would become dominated by Arab speakers and people of Arab culture, but in particular, the trans-Saharan trade had actually been occurring all the way back to the Roman times. So all the way back to the Roman times, when I forgot my man named Socrates or whatever my man, that went around and he travels parts of Africa and he talks about visiting Egypt and he talks about, remember Atlantis, all of that. Yep, during that, all the way going back to that period, talking about the Romans and the Greeks, it goes all the way back to then. In fact, if you go to Libya, you'll still see ruins from the Romans, you understand? So going all the way back to that time, you had people trading salt, ivory, leather, basically all the way with a caravan going all the way from the tropical region, which you call the Guinea in West Africa, to the Sahel, which is the transitional region between the tropical and the desert, which is more like savanna. And then you got the Sahara, you understand? And on the other side of the Sahara, you got the Mediterranean coast. So there'd been a trade occurring there since, the Romans, like I said. And then when the Arabs arrived, with the spread of Islam, they inherited that trade. And the rules of that trade, yes, became dictated by Islamic law. So you have one, which is to do with Islamic law, but the trade had existed prior to that. And even a lot of the Europeans, like, talk about the Roman Catholic Church, talk about even places like Malta. If you talk about, in parts of Portugal and they had African slaves for time. In fact, that was one of the biggest reasons for the creation of racial laws and the creation of companies during colonialism, because they knew that, okay, we have already a right to enslave Africans, but we don't have a right to enslave natives, technically under religious law, which is a whole different conversation. But they were doing it at first. They were actually using natives in the Americas at first to extract silver and gold. But actually under Catholic law, under any Christian law, technically this was not allowed. However, the loophole was to use Africans, you understand, because they'd already been doing that, because they were already slaves. And not just slaves, but remember, Europe had also been conquered by Africa at a certain point. Talk about the Almoravids, the Almohads, and other North Africans, with involvement of West Africans and Arabs as well, that conquered parts of Southern Europe, like Portugal, Italy. So there was that African presence, and this is often what's not talking about in Western education. Things that happened, the relations between Africans, Europeans, and the Middle East prior to slavery. But that's a whole different story. Then you have the other story, the other type of slavery. So you got the slavery within the Islamic world, and then you got slavery also, the traditional African slavery, which existed on a gradient. There isn't really one type, but generally speaking, it was more similar to a type of servitude. African tribes would enslave one another because they didn't really have prisons back then. So warring tribes would enslave one another, and if you worked hard, I think the most obvious example, more popular example is King Jaja of Apopo, which actually became a king and disrupted the whole British trade because they were actually paying tax to him, because that's how wealthy he became. And he started off as a slave, but he got adopted because he was of virtue and he works hard into that tribe, and even became a chief and then a king. But this is something in particular within the culture of West Africa, that it's not the transatlantic chattel slavery, which is something really just at first defined by European religious laws, the rise of shareholder capitalism, and also then scientific law that came later. But yeah, that created the conditions for chattel slavery, as well as the transition in Europe from feudalism to capitalism, especially with the arrival of white settler colonists within the Americas. These all created the conditions for American chattel slavery, which is throughout the whole Americas, which was reinforced basically through racial laws. And it's the idea that based on your ethnicity, your race, as a black person, you are not a human being. You are essentially cattle, and your kids and your kids' will be someone else's property, essentially. And if you're not someone else's property, you are not human. Do you get what I'm saying? So there's those distinctions to be made. But broadly speaking, the reason I bring this up here is because Nigeria participated a lot in the slave trade, as well as other West African nations. But broadly speaking, a lot of this, including if you talk in Congo as well, it really was to do with the arrival of the Portuguese. And there's actually letters, funny enough, from the certain ethnic groups in Congo to the Portuguese king, saying, actually, since you guys arrived and started doing slave raiding, but then you guys started now making deals with the king chiefdoms. Since this happened, the chiefdoms started warring each other more. And as they warred each other more, what does that mean? More slaves. And essentially, as it became more of a profitable venture, you understand? Because what would happen is the transatlantic slave trade was a triangle. So you'd have the Europeans bring industrial goods, you understand? These industrial goods, they now trade with chiefs and so forth, you understand, for slaves. These chiefs and stuff were already warring each other, but with the arrival of the Europeans, and they said, remember, we're going to take your slaves by force, your people, or you know what, instead of us doing that and fighting you guys, you go fight your enemies and bring us, you understand, their people. So they would then give them slaves. In return, the Europeans will now take them to the Americas, right? The Americas, remember, like I said, they'd already genocided most of the natives. So now they put them, these are plantation economies, you understand? So they grow tobacco, cotton, sugar, you understand, rum, and in other cases, gold, mining. But remember, even though these are plantation economies, the Americas in general, the backbone became free labor from slavery. So while they started off as plantation economies, they would shift to slave societies, you understand, where irregardless of the profession, in some shape or form, there was free labor being extracted from African peoples, right? So these are the resources they're producing, and as a result, the wealth created from these resources would now go back into European and Western societies to produce what? More, what's it called again? Industrial goods. So the industrialization of Europe and the West was subsidized by the profits generated from slavery, if that makes sense, and colonialism. And then those profits then were now taken to then go and trade with chiefdoms, corrupt chiefs, who would then sell slaves. And what ended up happening is what started off as conflicts then became a very corrupt trade within Nigeria, and to the point that basically these guys started selling each other out, you understand, selling out their own people. And it isn't until a guy called Usman Dan Fodio, because remember there was two types of slavery, generally speaking. In Islamic slavery, Muslims can't enslave Muslims, you understand, at all. And this was occurring within the Hausa kingdoms, as well as other things that were going against Islam, which led to a Fulani jihad, which wasn't exclusively Fulani, but led by a guy called Usman Dan Fodio, you understand. And that completely restructured the political infrastructure of the north of Nigeria. But essentially, a lot of the wealth of Nigeria was not only built through colonialism, but on slavery, you understand? And when the Europeans came and they said that, okay, we're going to abolish slavery in Nigeria, what they really meant, because was one, if you know about England said they were the first to abolish slavery. This is incorrect. It was Haiti. Haiti had a revolution before the English, and this is why England, along with America, England put racial laws in Barbados because they were afraid of something similar happening there, and then later in Jamaica and America, they installed Jim Crow because they were afraid that, especially post-slavery, if we have a bunch of free black people, what they're going to do, rebel. And it's not going to be like the French Revolution where things is going to go back to normal. This is going to be a real revolution where they're going to kill off the whole elite class, you understand, on the island that run things, you understand. And there was white people involved in the revolution, so that was also another reason to have racial laws to divide and conquer, because they don't want the working and middle classes united to rise up against the elite. So boom. So that is also a big reason as to why Jim Crow and all these things happen, because there was that ingrained fear of, if we don't control our assets, you understand, and our assets become liberated from us, we will. So England, while they abolished slavery, post-slavery, they had, similar to in America, how they, and I did my dissertation on this. I have a history degree. I did my dissertation. I called it the second slavery. In America, we know there was Jim Crow. We know there was discrimination. We know there was multiple things that post-slavery, like the military-industrial complex and the prison-industrial complex, and sharecropping, that essentially, in order to keep the economy of capitalism in America, which was built on the foundation of slavery, going, they need to keep the economy the same. So while the laws have changed on paper, essentially a lot of people of African descent remained in a similar situation to slavery. The British did their own thing. In Jamaica, they had apprenticeship schemes. On islands like St. Helena, there was a loophole where they still, even though they abolished it other places, they still were practicing slavery here. So that's where they're sending the slaves. And on top of that, they also brought in indentured servants or from India, which is why a place like Jamaica and Trinidad have a large Indian population, because after they made slavery illegal, they said, okay, people from the lower caste, which is essentially black as well in India, you understand, that are in debt, you understand, we're either going to purchase your debt from whoever, or you understand, you're in debt to us because India's a crown colony and some way you're in debt to us, so you're going to be our slave now, essentially, to summarize the whole thing. So the British it wasn't a virtuous thing when they were trying to abolish slavery when they came to Nigeria, because one, they'd already been profiting off slavery in Nigeria, and two, I remember when I say Nigeria, I'm talking about the kingdoms that inhabited. Nigeria doesn't exist. Nigeria is a British creation, to be frank. You understand? The nation state of Nigeria was a British creation, but I'm explaining how it came about. So when the British came, this was now a precedent for them now to colonize, you understand? And what did they send? They sent their missionaries and they sent their companies, you understand? These are the same companies that had already been profiting from slavery, you understand? So now they went to go acquire land, you understand? And how did they acquire land? Well, those that are practicing slavery, they're conquering through companies, through missionaries, or through the British Army formerly, you understand, for practicing slavery because it goes against now British law, or they're installing chiefdoms that are loyal to them, you understand? And a lot of these chiefdoms that were loyal to them were already participating in slavery. So post slavery, as we enter the colonial era in Nigeria, as the Southern Protectorate, the Northern Protectorate are amalgamized into one as they're sold to the British Empire from companies that are registered in the United Kingdom that are already paying tax to the king and queen, you understand? So it's all a loophole, you understand? It's all a loophole. But essentially, what it resulted in is that a lot of the wealth, the leaders, like I said, they were already that the British installed were already practicing slavery, or the leaders that had already been successful there had profited off the prior transatlantic slave trade. So those same puppets that the British had now put in Nigeria, you understand, or that had already been there, you understand, from that wealth of the slave trade, yeah. Now when the British now came and they colonized Nigeria, remember I've talked about that whole triangular trade. That economy still exists. So the British have industrial goods, you understand? And remember, they've industrialized subsidized through slavery and plantation and slave societies and plantation economies. So what's now happened now is the British they're still using the same resource. They're still collecting bananas from Jamaica, you understand? It's now indentured servants growing it. And there's still palm oil, you understand? While it's used traditionally in African cooking, the British were using it they needed it as lubricant for all their industrial machines to function well. Okay, so who's growing the palm oil? Is it not slaves? Is it not slaves now that are now doing forced labour on the behalf of the British? And it's still slavery. And I'll break it down in another way. Is another country that was doing the exact same thing with a different resource. In Congo, 10 million people were killed. To put it in context, 3 million people were killed in the Holocaust. 10 million people were killed under King Leopold's Congo. So this was under direct control of the king himself. This was his own personal colony. Not even of Belgium, but the king himself owned privately this colony, yeah? Now, slavery technically is illegal, bro. But at the time, Henry Ford his car is spreading all over, and most of the Western world is now adapting to the automobile, which means they need rubber. Where's the rubber coming from? Congo. Who's growing the rubber? Is it not slaves? And you can't tell me it's not slavery, because what happened to them? They were killed, they were mutilated. Remember when we talk about short sleeve and long sleeve? You understand? If you don't know what short sleeve and long sleeve is when we talk about a lot of African conflicts, and you talk about child soldiers, people, and you talk about mutilation. So you have short sleeve, which is you cut here, and you have long sleeve. You understand, where you cut the whole arm off. All of these concepts, short sleeve, long sleeve, child soldiers, all started in King Leopold's Congo. So you can't tell me under those conditions, the people growing rubber were not slaves. You get what I'm saying? So this is This is the effects of colonialism. So similar in Britain, all this palm oil and palm wine that was being grown, being made, you understand, under the colonial administration, it's still there's a lot of, this is why you might not hear, when you talk about the African countries in a post-colonial context, you will hear slavery, but you might hear more of a focus on colonialism, because slavery is more so a thing that affected what's it called again? The African Americans, West Indians, those in the diaspora, right? But in the context of West Africa, in particular places like Nigeria and Ghana, places which were on the slave coast as well as the Gold Coast, you understand, the slave coast, very much the same ideological psychological, physical, and structural impacts of things like white supremacy, things like colonialism, and all these things that come from slavery, you see in Nigeria as well. But it's just not discussed as much because it's not prominent in the culture. The difference in a place like America, where it has such an impact on a demographic, is that they've had to be critical because they had to fight for their rights. In Nigeria, the same thing happened, you understand? A lot of the same structures, you understand? But because it's not a white man in charge, you understand? It's hard for people to look at it the same way. But there is a lot of slave structures still within Nigeria, like you have in the South in America, you understand, or you have in the Caribbean. But the difference, it hasn't been fully addressed, you understand. And these structures, like I said, have been left in the context of colonialism, in the context of the slave trade, but also in the context of neoliberalism and capitalism. You understand that, like I said, was the root of when slavery, the reason slavery came about, you understand, in particular at that particular time, was a transition from feudalism into capitalism, and the backbone of capitalism, as we know it in the Western world, was slavery and colonialism. So the same structures you see in Nigeria, like I said, but it's not talked about as much for various political reasons, which is why people like him are very brave. You understand, whether you agree with him or not, still at least he's putting his own opinion, and he can be corrected. You can critique him himself, but at least he's putting his own opinion out there. But yeah, that's why you'll hear him talking a lot of the context of African slavery, because in particular that slave mindset that people might say when you're critiquing the institutions in America, you're critiquing the mindset, and I'm talking from a perspective of a black person, remember, not from a perspective of a white person. So you, as a black person, you might critique your fellow black people that might have a slave mindset in the Americas, in the UK, in the Caribbean. But that same thing also exists as in Africa as well. As well as the colonial mindset, some countries also have a slave mindset as well. And this is not me to talk down on people, but this is me talking from a place of, you understand, as one of those people, you understand, is that because of the impacts of slavery as well as colonialism in certain African countries, you also see those same mentalities that need to be challenged in order for systemic change, in order for progress, in order for the sake of all these things that, especially in particular, the African youth want. You won't get it without a critique of colonialism, without a critique of slavery, without a critique of the status quo, which is neoliberalism and capitalism and current political institutions. Because a lot of without these things, what ends up becoming is simply, it's just about leadership. It's just about leadership. But then people wonder, why is one party the same as the other? Because the context that this leadership comes from, the system produces the same type of leaders. So it's not just simple as the leader, because then what happens is, it's like, okay, if we have the right guy and we put all the power in him, then maybe things will magically change. That's how we get dictators in Africa, in my opinion. This ain't me talking on facts, but this is just from my observations and from my understanding, my background of history, from what I've studied and global media and communications. That's part of the problem. So I think it's very important that, as well as us challenging what's going on right now, also how we got here. You understand? And that's why I rate my man. But yeah, sorry, I'm talking too much. Let me just play the video.
You go dey okay with your own death, with your own demise. You go dey excuse himself. You go dey excuse the people who they kill him. As they kill him, you go dey make excuses for them. You understand? Say they go dey wipe you when the person go flog you, and when the person flog you.
And you know what he's talking about right now. You see, this is one thing, and I think in particular those in the African diaspora, but those continental Africans, and also those in the African diaspora in the UK that are just of African descent, we have to show respect to our cousins, the African Americans, because without them, a lot of the civil rights we enjoy in these Western countries, we wouldn't have, straight up. Because, you see, they already have all the language for all the stuff he's talking about, the archetypes in slavery. What he's talking about, they already have an African American culture. They have a label for all these things. Uncle Tom, a coon, you understand? They have a label for this stuff so that when they can see a sellout, they can label it that and they can deal with it. Whereas in African culture, even though the same thing does occur, like I said, for the same reasons, you understand? But we just haven't spoken about. Because we haven't spoken about, we haven't got a label for these things. So we don't know if it's actually... We don't know if this is something that happens, this is part of our culture, or if this is something that we've learned from the Europeans that's to our demise. So I think it's important that not only do we start talking about these things, but those that paved the way for us, we've got to learn from them as well. So those that fought for civil rights, you understand, in America, they've already done a lot of the literature there, a lot of the terminology is there, you understand. As continental Africans got to start utilising that literature and that terminology in our context as well. Because it's the same people, you understand, going through the same thing. But we just don't see it that way. But once we see it that way, then we'll realize, okay, in the same way, we've done half the work for our brothers and sisters on the continent, you understand? The same way they've done half the work for us, you understand, in the West. So we've got to have that cultural exchange rather than us pointing fingers at each other and saying this, and this. Oh, you understand? The reason you guys, because I know Nigerians like to do this, you understand? I know African, all of us are guilty, bro. But Nigerians also like to blame, you understand, with no context of what's going on and think, okay, the reason them people aren't doing well is because they're... No. They don't come from the context you're coming from, you understand? And they've probably put in half the work already for you to do well in that country. If we're talking about America, the reason Nigerians can do well in America is because of the civil... If there's no civil rights in America, do you think they're letting Nigerians come in? Nigerians, remember they're calling people niggers in America at this time. Yeah? Black man, there's the same thing that's going on in South Africa, apartheid. They got Jim Crow in America, you understand? If people like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X didn't fight for rights, do you think you can be a successful Nigerian businessman in America without any rights? Without the same rights as a white person, do you understand? So rather than us pointing fingers saying, oh, the reason African Americans aren't doing well is because so, and so. It's like, no, you've come from a place of privilege when you arrive here because they've done half the work for you. In the same way, if an African American arrives in Nigeria, yeah, and they can now get property, this, and this, is like, and they say, oh, the reason this class of Africans is not, no, they've done half the work for you. Because 10, 20 years ago, when places like the US and the UK were leeching off Nigeria, there was no infrastructure. It was a fight uphill to get all this stuff built. So I think this is what we need to understand, is we've already done all the work for each other in different places. I feel like we need that cultural exchange of information. Information is key, and that's where the empowerment is. But yeah, man, without further ado, before I go off on I know how my brain works, how I go off on tangents, so let's just watch the video of it.
If flog you so they income collapse from flogging you. So now you wait and the flog will still stand up, go the treat, they wake up, say, oh, wake up, master, wake up, don't die. Don't die from killing me, hey, master. So when you can't die, when you can't die, if you can't wake up, you can't get small fever, so now you go still no sound. Say, sorry for, fainting while you were beating me. You were only trying to make me better, you are using all your energy to try and make me better. Sorry for fainting, you are trying to make me better. You can't faint. Use all your energy. They beat me. Master. So that's how you will be. If you only have Western education in your brain, then that's how your life could be. And it manifests in many ways. And see one news today. I will talk that one second.
So this is what he's talking about. When I was talking about those you call sellouts and those you call... This is what I attribute to ideology, yeah? And even the CIA says actually that one of the most important ways to control humans isn't through giving them, isn't through money, is actually through ideology. But ideology is determined by information and education you have. And unfortunately, a lot of the education we have, not only about the whole world and our perspective as Africans, but also ourselves, comes from foreigners. It comes from those that colonize us, that try to subjugate us. And when you try to subjugate someone, you're going to limit their information so you can control and you have power over them. So the result is that even the most successful of us that only have a Western education, we are also limited in certain ways. We can't see our full potential and our full power. And if you can't see your full potential or full power, imagine how you look at those like you understand? Especially those less privileged than you, but look like you. You're going to look down on them, you understand? Versus if you have a critical understanding of Western socioeconomic structures and you understand, okay, how they've exploited places like Africa in the context of colonialism and capitalism, then you can have a more nuanced perspective and a more nuanced understanding of yourself and other people that are like you understand? And you're less likely in that context to act like the colonizer. You might, like I said, you might make a lot of profit based off Western education. You might become very successful. But in terms of materially what you're going to do for your nation, materially what you're going to do for your people, and materially what you're going to do for those that look like you might be limited, you understand, due to your perspective and the information you have. So that's why it's important for us to be critical of these things as well, equally as much to master them. You understand? We've got to be critical so that we don't have an enslaved mentality, because with an enslaved mentality, not only do we enslave ourselves, we enslave other people that are like us without knowing better because of misinformation and misunderstanding. So yeah, man, I agree with that point. I do believe that, listen, still we live in a certain society, so you got to play the game. So you want to understand how the rules of the game and how the game works before you break the rules. So that is actually, I would say, one advantage a lot of Nigerians do have, is that you do have Western education. But it's that you need the critique as well. You understand? You need the critique and you need the opposite, which is an authentic African education as well. And I wasn't educated in Nigeria, so what I talk on has limits. I could be getting a lot wrong here. But I do know I have relationships with my relatives and those older than me, and I understand a lot of the things they were taught were the same things I was taught in school. And I also understand I had to challenge a lot of the things I learned here in the UK actively to learn the truth about who I was, my culture, and also the truth about the world. I had to challenge a lot of it, you understand, and do my own research into my own culture, African culture, culture of the African diaspora, to really find out the truth of what's going on. And without doing that, I wouldn't have a certain respect for myself and other people that look like me, and I wouldn't be able to do certain things with my people. So yeah, man, I agree with that point. I do think you still want to have that Western education because, bro, we got to still play the game, but we got to have a critique and we got to have an alternative as well. And you can't just be Black History Month, because Black History just didn't happen in 1 month for us. We just learn the same blood clot thing every single year. You understand? And civil rights is important, bro, but it's not just civil rights and slavery. That's our whole history, or else that's even an issue itself. Then there's limitations, that stuff. Same as every other ethnicity, being kings, queens, slaves. We fought for our rights. We've oppressed people as well. We fought amongst each other. All of this needs to be taught within Black history. If Black history goes back to the start of human history, you understand? African history, you understand? The first humans, you understand, are in Africa. Some of the first peoples, you understand, in every single continent were Black peoples, you understand? Because you have the first migration out of Africa. If you just do any research on the first peoples in the UK, when they do digital recreations or physical, they're all Black people. So also, as if you study African history properly, you realize, okay, African history is human history. We're all African at the end of the day. So you see the humanity and everything. So all these things, it just shifts your perspective, you understand? Versus if you start with a national history, and the national history starts with colonialism, then you're defined at a certain point, you understand? You're defined by your oppressor. And that's where your history starts. And that's how you see yourself. What defines you, also how you're different to everything else. So which one would you rather have? And that's my point, is that you need both to have a full understanding of the truth.
When I first talk this one, call this one quick. One of the ways that in the manifest, and when they tell you now as Africans, say, let's go and do the African way. Let us be socialists. Let's socialize our country. Make everybody feel they live well. Now still Africans where they suffer. Africans where capitalism never solve any problem for their life. Africans where capitalism they kill every day. Then they go tell you, say, no, if they give people free things, they're not going to work. They're not going to work. They will not have.
See, one thing I think people get misconstrued is capitalism and business aren't necessarily the same thing. Capitalism is just everything for profit, you understand? Which means every solution you're going to profit off, and it comes in hand with neoliberalism, because neoliberalism says we're doing these things for rights of the people. But the truth is, all these rights are only afforded to those that own property and of a certain class that have a certain amount of wealth. Which means if you don't have a citizenship and have this amount of wealth and own this land and own these assets, the truth is those rights aren't assured to you. So reality of every single problem politically is capitalism, right? But you can still have markets and you can still have businesses in certain socialized systems, you understand? Example is a lot of the Nordic countries, they have sovereign wealth funds, which means that in a case like Nigeria, where you have a lot of oil producing, they see it as that's the wealth of the nation, you understand? So all of that wealth then gets put into a sovereign wealth fund, which pays for a lot of the public fundamental needs that most people need, as well as certain assets that everyone uses, you understand? So everyone feels that wealth in the most essential ways people need: healthcare, education, and so forth. But there still are markets within place in these Nordic countries. There still are businesses, you understand? Same thing with China, but that's because also China has its own version of communism and a liberalized to a certain extent under change of leadership, but still China, still a lot of the assets are publicly and socially owned, especially what you call utilities. So utilities are services that are kind of monopolies by nature that everyone needs, that are essentials. So by nature, the railway is a utility. You understand? You can't really have a proper functioning market where all these things are competing with each other and the best will. No. By nature, it's a utility and it's a monopoly. So in certain countries, they will say, we're going to nationalize a railway and this service will be controlled by the government or controlled by the people. And certain parts of it might be leased to certain companies, like in the UK, but fundamentally it's owned by still the government because it's a utility. Because if you give it to a private company, by nature you're going to create a monopoly, and that person, which incentive isn't to solve the transport issue but to profit off it, it's only going to make travel more expensive in that country, if that makes sense, by nature, as that person's profiting off it. So yeah, I think that's what people need to understand, is just because you socialize something doesn't mean everything's free, and doesn't mean everyone isn't going to be incentivized to work. In fact, if you take care of the essentials everyone needs in society, people are more likely to spend in that economy on non-essential things, you understand, around the board, especially because, and then what that creates is a consumer class. That consumer class is the middle class, you understand. When you have a strong middle class in the country, you have low levels of inequality, which affects so many other things, you understand, like crime, you understand, because that means you have social mobility in that country. So all these things, it's a knock-on effect, and that actually incentivizes people to now spend more. If people are spending more, people are making more money, so people are more likely to work harder. So sometimes I think we essentialize things too much because of the perspective we've been sold on things. Oh, capitalism equals business. So no capitalism, no business, which means you give everyone everything for free, which means no one has no incentive to work. It's a very reductionist and very simplistic way of understanding markets, economies, and geopolitics. Versus when I break it down the way you break it down, you realize, okay, there's actually economics doesn't work that way. You understand? It doesn't run like a household, like an individual. You understand? Or it doesn't work like that. You understand? It's a lot more complicated, and it's, at the end of the day, all of these things, as much as we can add mathematics into it, is social studies. So it's about understanding people and the way people and psychology and the way, especially people within numbers, function. You understand? These are all social sciences. As much as we can try and make it all about maths, it's all under the humanities, the way I see it. So it's all to do with people, bro.
They don't go get self-belief. You kill their self-respect. They don't go get any way to, they don't feel express themselves. They don't go feel find way. Whereas you allow rich people now don't convince you, right? You follow capitalism. No.
On the flip side, though, I can understand the argument for those that in particular live in European countries, but I don't attribute this necessarily to, because I would say especially Europe since World War II, a lot of this social democratic, people see Europe as very socially democratic and more left wing, and since then it's really liberalized a lot of Europe, like America. So a lot of things are getting privatized. And a lot of people say the self-expression in Europe isn't the same in America, the things you can do because of taxes and all this. But I'd say a lot of that is just because of the bureaucracy. It's just unnecessary bureaucracy that exists within these countries, and unnecessarily too much rules and regulations, which isn't necessarily to do with certain things being socialized. It's to do with nepotism. It's to do with lack of innovation and trying things new, you understand? It's to do with trying to keep the status quo the same, and those nepotites just benefiting off that, and that can happen within any political structure. So I'd say the whole thing of, you're more free under capitalism, and this, to a certain extent, when you're taxed less, when you can do what you want with your assets and your resources, there, yes, you can do a lot more. But I say a big part of that also is if you're in a culture where there's a lot of bureaucracy and there's not a lot of innovation, and that can happen anywhere, you understand? And Europe has a lot of that for sure, and I say a lot of that more so to do with the legacy of colonialism, is that because of the exploitation experiences places like the UK before Brexit and before all these things, they don't need, to produce anything. They don't need to, they can be just a service economy because they're exploiting the rest of the world. until Brexit happens, until all these things happen, they realize, okay, we're just a shitty little rock in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. I'm from the UK, I can say it was a shit, but yeah, it's true. You understand? Great Britain isn't Great Britain anymore. The British Empire, the sun is set on the British Empire. You get what I'm saying? So you have to deal with the reality of the economy now because, yeah, man, while all these other nations, they say necessity is the mother of all invention. By necessity, have had to grow, have had to innovate. The UK hasn't because it's been in a privileged position where they can exploit everyone else. So I'd say that's why a lot of bureaucracies within these countries like Europe, I wouldn't say it's because of they have like socialized healthcare that people can't express themselves or they're more. Nah, I wouldn't agree with that point.
No, so let people work for what they have. These same rich people, you allow them steal all your property. Now you cannot get anything free. You cannot. But when they steal all your property, finish. When they die, they will leave them for their children. Their children will grow up with free money where the children don't work for.
Okay, so this is also something that's going to happen in the UK. And to kind of explain, so the reverse of what I was explaining earlier is basically, and there's a guy called Gary's Economics that breaks this down very well. But essentially, if you want to understand value, especially from more of a Marxist understanding, and Marxism is just kind of a critique of capitalism from a historical point of view. It's not necessarily an ideology in the same way socialism or communism is, yeah. So just simply a critique of capitalism in this perspective is that you got to understand that value is actually determined by the labor that's put in and the natural resources to use to make whatever products or service you're doing, right? Everything else is artificial value to do with pricing, so supply and demand, location, all these other things that you can create yourself, but the actual inherent value is within those two things, right? So with that being said, those that create value within the economy, right, the workers and they're essentially creating value for the sake of another individual's profit from this critique, yeah? And when there isn't certain services to protect those classes, the working and the middle classes, what ends up happening is the middle classes are those that are supposed to own assets, right? And the working class that are supposed to be those that work hard, creating value to purchase assets, you understand? Like a house, you understand, like a car. What happens is when things get expensive and certain things, services aren't covered by the people or the government, like healthcare, like transport, like education, which aren't luxuries but are seen as essentials, you still have to spend money on these things, you understand? So what ends up happening is the middle class ends up selling those assets. When they sell off their assets to afford these essentials for their kids, because usually it happens generationally. The first generation might be able to afford these assets, but the second generation, if things get more expensive, might not be able to, and the third. And then what ends up happening is they sell those assets to the rich, which purchase those assets, you understand? And they're not renting it else to everyone else. What ends up happening is society becomes more unequal, the middle class shrink, and society becomes more unequal between the extreme rich and the poor, and everyone's renting from the extreme rich, and the extreme rich essentially what's it called again, continue to use that money to purchase people's assets, essentially. And these assets, a lot of the assets then end up purchasing national assets, you understand, that should belong to all the people. So this is what happens when you have a society of extreme inequality, or in the direction to extreme inequality. The ideal way is you want people to be rich and wealthy, but you don't want people to be billionaires, essentially. You want people to, like, you can be a millionaire, but you want, if you're a billionaire, is this case where no millionaires are paying any tax, you understand? And when I mean millionaires, billionaires, I'm not talking about just wealthy people. I'm talking about people that essentially control your nation, that control the politics in your nation, essentially, because they control most of the resources. So if they control such a significant portion of the resources within your nation, because you've got to think about, what is the billion equivalent in resources in my nation? How much oil is that? How much say so do these people through lobbying and so forth have over the politics of the country? And is your vote equal to their vote? And this is what I mean neoliberalism, and this is what I mean is capitalism profit under neoliberalism is the solution to everything. The person's vote, your vote at the end of the day, is not equal to that guy that's lobbying with £1 billion. It's not. It's not in a neoliberal structure. So this is what happens Politically, you lose your rights, you understand, as well, when society becomes extremely unequal. So yeah, man, this is kind of, I feel like, what he's alluding to.
Just free money. And where your own bad as African man, we say that free money come from your own stolen commonwealth. Their children, why they don't talk say if they leave inheritance for their children no go get self-belief, you know, go one war, say you kill him, picking self-esteem, you know, why they know they talk all those kind of things? Because our country is the parent of everybody. Now our country be everybody papa and mama. The things what we get belong to everybody. So why you no want make government use them like inheritance? You inherit your country now. As they born you here, you have inherited the wealth of your country. So why can't you benefit from that inheritance?
Another thing I didn't talk about with the transatlantic slave trade is post-transatlantic slave trade, yeah? So remember, at first they came taking Africans, yeah? After they started taking Africans, what did they start doing? They started now taking physical resources, the raw resources from Africa, using the slave labor now in Africa, but it's just, they've just installed their own chiefs to do it, you understand? So they're the British aren't the ones practicing slavery directly, and they're using that to extract rubber, gold, cobalt, steel, iron, now bauxite and lithium and all these other new minerals, yeah. But they've been doing this to industrialize the actual resources that were used to build Britain, the actual physical infrastructure of all the big cities, you understand, in places like the UK. Those physical resources come from Africa, if that makes sense. So that's what he's alluding to as well. It's not only they take that human capital, but the physical resources. And the thing is, those resources are still going to them. You can even say again, you see, when you talk about the class structure in the West, one thing it doesn't take into consideration is racial capitalism. So there's actually, in the same way, I say there's a caste structure in the same way in places like the caste system in India, where there's another class subsidizing the working, middle, and upper classes, you understand? It's not just those classes. It's not just the proletariat and the bourgeoisie and all these things they say. No, there's a class of people from the global south that have always subsidized, you understand, that wealth, regardless of what class you're in, going all the way back to colonialism and slavery, because of the wealth, the human capital from Africa helps subsidize the industrial growth of Western civilization. And this is still going on today because a lot of the best educated, smart minds leave Africa to go where? Work in the West. And what does that do? Help develop the Western economy, Western institutions. But what happens as a result? African institutions become weaker, more corrupt, because the best, smartest of us are working, slaving away in different countries. And it is what it is, man. It's not necessarily a negative thing, but this is just the kind of post-colonial effects that we don't analyze as Africans, you understand? When we think, okay, it's sustainable for all Africans, you understand, with money to now leave, or even without money to leave Africa and go study in Europe, you understand? How is that sustainable? That's a brain drain. How is that any different to the effects of slavery that drain the human capital and potential of Africa? It's the same thing in terms of just statistics. All these people, not in terms of brutality, but in terms of statistics and economic effects, yeah, you're losing all the best people in Africa to go work for pennies, you understand? Because yeah, the transition of money is big, but what they don't tell you is you're working for pennies in expensive countries, you understand? And a lot of these people are the same people Westerners complain about in immigration. So they haven't got those rights. Remember I said about neoliberalism, you haven't got property, you haven't got a passport, you haven't got all these things, you haven't got those rights. So the truth is, you're an alien in these countries with zero rights, you understand? If ICE catch you, you haven't got any rights in America, you understand? Because you're not an American citizen. You don't own property. You don't, because you need property. When I tell you, you need property, you need all these things to get American citizenship. So remember, it's all about profit. That's what I mean. The solution, neoliberalism, everything is capitalism, which is everything is profit, you understand? So what ends up happening is the same effects. If we value something that is not us over what we've, you understand? Have you ever heard the saying, the grass is greener where you water it, not just on the other side? You get what I'm saying? And at the moment, we're watering our colonizer's garden. And what's going to end up happening if we keep on doing that forever because of our ideology or mentality is we're not going to water our own garden. Do you get what I'm saying? And that's what's going on.
Of your country, your heritage. They didn't call it our heritage. That's the word. Your heritage. And somebody say it's not okay for you to benefit from your heritage, and you believe, while those same people who carry everything with that same heritage, differ for themselves, can't live out for their children as inheritance. We excuse capitalism. Excuse us. Tell me one. I don't always tell everybody for Nigeria, because we know be Europeans. I don't let them argue, even that Europe they won't take argue me. I don't see everything there na facade, na illusion. Yes, na illusion. So now Africa now they use argue with them, because them that Europeanized and Arabized.
I said Europeanized and Arabized.
Either winter cold don't freeze their brain, or desert heat don't melt them. None of them normal. It's either the cold of European ideology, that cold ideology don't burn their brain, they don't freeze their brain, or the heat of Arabic ideology don't melt them. No one they okay. They're going to argue about your life.
He said, he said the code of European ideology don't burn their heads, don't freeze their brain, and the heat of Arab ideology, don't burn their brain.
When they use the example from Sweden, they say in Sweden,
talking facts, so.
In Finland,
you can't expect to get respect from anyone else if you don't have respect for yourself. And we, as Africans, in particular Nigerians, have a lot of pride. But where's the pride coming from? You understand? Because you don't want to be proud for being an Uncle Tom or being an errand boy. And funny enough, that's what all these countries in Burkina Faso and all these countries are doing coups. That's what they're calling Nigerians now, because not because of Nigerians, but because of our leaders. We're siding with the West. They're calling us errand boys because we don't have respect for ourselves. Our sense of respect is from fitting into a colonial structure and doing well within that infrastructure. Do you get what I'm saying? Not from us benefiting off our own our own culture, our own values, you understand? Which we do, but that's not what we're taking pride in. That's not what the whole world sees, you understand? And we know we have that. In fact, we've shown it to the world, but we just don't show it enough politically, in the context of politics. So this is why I agree, is that we as Africans, we put too much value into doing things properly. Means often doing the things the Western way. Doing things in a modern way means doing things in a modern way, bro. And as someone that's in the West right now, I can tell you a lot of the things in the West are going backwards. So what happens when the West isn't leading the way anymore, but you have all the resources of the whole world, you have the human capital, you have all the brain power, you have the older culture, but you don't respect any of these things, you understand? So you have the potential to lead the way, but without that self-respect, you won't be able to implement, and you'll actually be under the jurisdiction of those that have less than you understand? Not because of resources, not because of people, but because of what? Because those that rule over you, their mindset, you understand? So this is what I mean. I agree when I say I agree with him. It's like you gotta have respect for yourself, you understand? And there's a lot to respect in Africa, there's a lot to respect in Nigeria, you understand? We just gotta look at it differently, from a different perspective.
In Saudi Arabia, in UAE, I say bastard. Which of these countries? Here in your country where you live and exist, waiting capitalism don't solve for Africa. Brothers and sisters, we enter fully into capitalism in 1860 in Nigeria. 1861, when Nigeria was
funny enough, I love the infrastructure in Nigeria and in Africa in general. Isn't from America, isn't from the UK, but it's from a communist country called China, because they have their own Belt and Road Initiative. Yeah, we're clapping our hands so much for capitalism, but we don't realize that's just the status quo. That's just the game we're playing, you understand? Just focus on completing the game, Momo. Stop clapping for the rules of the game, bro. If we gotta break the rules to complete the game, we gotta break the rules, you understand? If the game isn't fair, the game isn't fair. But we can't. The objection is to complete the game. You understand? not for the sake of the game, but because it just is what it is. You understand? And this is the only way of us getting to the pot of gold, so we can feed ourselves. But there's other ways of getting to the pot of gold. You understand? At the end of the day, it's about feeding ourselves. You understand? So we gotta stop just like fucking worshipping the game, man, and start understanding how to be a player, or understanding how to be a creator and building our own new games. You understand? That's what we should be focusing on. Capitalism, neoliberalism, it just is what it is. We have to play this game no matter what. But it doesn't mean you have to worship it. You understand? If you're put in a certain challenge, you understand, you have to complete that challenge. Alright, you complete the challenge, but that's because of your own intuition, your own ability to skills, your own strength, you understand? Those that have taught you. It's not because of you being forced in this challenge. You understand? And that's the challenge. It's not the challenge that makes you a better person. It's your ability to get through that makes you a better person. Do you get what I'm saying? The power's within you, and that's what we need to start seeing. Is like, it's not capitalism that's making us better people. It just is what it is. You understand? Regardless of the political structure, we got to look at like our culture will get us through this. And that's what I genuinely believe. It's African culture that makes Africa great. It's not European political structures, colonial structures, capitalism, any of this stuff. It's us, and we've always been great from the get-go.
Cleared protectorate. Before amalgamation, Southern and Northern protect 1861, I know this nonsense start. Really? We will lose our complete sovereignty. Since that time till now, I beg, tell me one thing where capitalism don't solve. One problem, make I allow now. Let me allow you people think about it. Which problem? Water problem? I'm giving you water. Solve light problem. Transportation problem. Education problem. Health problem. Housing problem.
Well, the key is, if you're, like I said, the solution is in a capitalist society isn't democracy or any of these things. The reality of it is those that have profit and that can own assets with this profit, lighting and all these things will be solved. But those that don't, you understand, well, no, your rights and all these things they say in democracy won't. So the truth is, profit, if you're generating profit, then all these problems will appear like they're being solved. But that isn't the masses. Not everyone will be generating profit, because that profit comes at the expense of others being exploited. So those that are exploited, which is the masses. None of capitalism isn't solving any of their issues. It's not solving any of the issues. It's profiting off it, and you might come up with new innovative ways to profit off it, but innovation isn't exclusive to capitalism, if that makes sense. They say the necessity of innovation necessity is the mother of invention. This is true, but also it's not scarcity that enables political structures and growth and economic structures, but it's actually surplus. So this is the balance, man. The reason people attribute agriculture to civilization isn't because that scarcity enabled political structure and all these things. No, it was surplus, you understand? So there's a balance between only having what you need and you need to do more with it and making the most of it, but also having to produce as much as you can so that you can thrive, you understand? It's not about living below in scarcity. You got to produce surplus, but it's also understand that, listen, it's not so at certain times the limitations you have are actually your blessing, and that's simple. It's not capitalism. That it's literally the limitations that you have sometimes are your blessing, because that's when you have to think outside the box. It's not capitalism that makes that. It's human intuition.
Leadership problem, political problem. Name one thing in our country that capitalism has solved. No problem. Nothing has been solved. But we make excuses. Now the example, I say person, the example be say, if you are westernized or Arabized, they go flog you. See, the person they flog you go collapse from flogging you. During the flogging, not only will you fight back, you not fight back. Now when the person don't collapse, instead of me go press his neck for the kind of pain where it causes you, you cannot think of that. I say you must go dey wake am up. Now you go dey pour am water. Say, wake up, master. Wake up, master. Sorry, master. Hey, you're just helping me, and you faint while you are helping me. Oh, master. All this energy. You love me so much. You love me so much. You beat me till you faint. Oh, Yanko, master. Master, wake up. Oh, wake up. I need more flogging. Oh, God. Jesus, Muhammad. Oh, master. Somebody say capitalism has allowed the music industry to survive. Which music industry? What we have in Nigeria is music business. I've told you this many times. Nigeria has music business. Stop saying music industry. There's no industry in Nigeria. And I don't think industry is a word. Google the meaning of industry and then check if Nigeria has music industry. We have good music business. Yeah, well, it's okay. Anybody can have good music business. What I tell the music businessmen of the world, the big great music businessmen of the world, is that
I think he's what he's alluding to is a lot of the actual a lot of the entertainment and music industry now has been captured by American institutions, American conglomerates, you understand, which is the same thing in the whole Western world, whether you're in Australia, Canada, whatever, UK, is that it's Sony, Universal and Warner that run the whole music industry. And the same thing with film. There's only three that own everything else: distribution deals, other labels, you understand. And essentially vast majority of business in Western countries is being done with these countries to have any significance in the music quote unquote industry, but really none of these countries have an industry. It's just America that has an industry, then they just have business. And I say to a certain extent this happened in Africa as well, whereas before there was a culture and an industry that was reliant on itself, and now in order to be significant in some shape or form, people don't realize that, okay, a lot of the significant artists are actually signed to the same institutions, which means, put it this way, yeah, for a long time Nigeria is a very large oil producing nation, but the reason they can be exploited is because most of the oil refineries aren't in Nigeria, it's in European, Western and Asian countries. So the oil is now sent to be refined in other countries and sold back to Nigeria. What this means is that most of the wealth is going into the hands of the politicians and into foreigners and foreign companies, not into the workers. And these resources are coming from what? Local hands, right? But the money, if that money was used instead to develop its own refineries, which is now happening now, then what ends up happening is that infrastructure is now local in Nigeria. The money stays within Nigeria. More of the money goes back into Nigeria, and on top of that, more of that money can be used to build more refineries and more. And then now you have a real oil industry. You're not just taking oil out of the ground. And the same thing with music is that a lot of the money isn't being held locally in Africa to develop studios, to develop. They don't know, because most of these artists, when they're doing well, they go to the States, you understand? They're recording their music. Because I work with Afrobeat, so a lot of they're recording music videos where in the States, in the UK, they're recording in the, you understand? And they also have a distribution deal with an American company. But they started off making music in Nigeria. And then most of their institutions are in, most of their consumers are in Nigeria. So the point that I think he's trying to make is, do we really have an industry at that point? We have consumers, we have artists, we have businessmen, but do we have an industry? I don't know if he's fully correct, but I think it's something to think about.
Michael Jackson was the greatest of us all as music businessmen of black heritage. No black musician in this world has seen Michael Jackson money in music. Now they just closed the house last week. Finally, they just collect the house last week for Nevada. Go and Google it. Foreclosure. Say he has not been paying his bills. Say the estate is broke. But when you say you get 2 billion Beatles catalog, this one, that one, the estate to close. That was our greatest music businessman. Music to close. So all these things where they take the wash now. You know, all these wash now. Don't worry. Time is the judge of everything, you know.
Alright, man, so that's Seun Kuti talking a bit about the state of Nigeria, Nigerian business and politics. I don't agree with everything he says, but I think more so what he's trying to get is critique the slave mentality and the colonial mentality that exists within Nigeria, as well as in many other places within the African diaspora and within the African continent. And I do believe we as people got to address it not from a place of harm or a place of judgment, from a place of how do we improve ourselves and how do we deal with some of the negative things that happened in the past that still impact today. So I think that's important, man. At the same time, though, there still is a lot of positive things to be said about Nigeria, Nigerian culture, Nigerian society, the Nigerian people, and even the way Nigerians do business, the music we make. But at the same time, if we don't critique the system that was given to us by the British, then we're always going to produce the same type of leaders, and we're always going to remain within the same sort of state, experiencing the same problems. And that fundamentally is why I agree with Seun Kuti on this in terms of addressing the slave mindset, addressing the colonial mindset. When you do that, we liberate ourselves, we liberate our minds, and we open opportunities up for different perspectives, innovation, and new ways of doing things, you understand? So yeah, man, big up Seun Kuti, big up Nigeria, big up the Nigerian people, whether you Fulani, Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, whatever you are. There's so many tribes in Nigeria, so many cultures, but we're all Nigerian, we're all African, you understand? So yeah, everyone big up themselves, man. And yeah, man, have respect from where you are from. You understand where you're going. You understand who you are. And yeah, man, irregardless of the system, man, keep moving forward and just don't forget that, man. But yeah, man, this has been Frontline Media, and I'm out.
You are tuned in to